Well, welcome everyone. My name is Angel Pilar. I'm a professor here at College of San Mateo. First, I want to thank the people in Zoom for coming, and of course, Professor Garcia as well. Thank you for being here. I wanted to give a little introduction about our speaker for today. Professor Garcia has a PhD in physics, and he's also a professor at San Jose State for both physics and astronomy. In 2012, he earned the Outstanding Professor Award for his effectiveness as a professor and his ability to bring STEM education to the visual arts. He's also been praised by his students for his empathy and ability to convey complex topics to be understood by all his students. Aside from his teaching, Professor Garcia has been a physics consultant at DreamWorks Animation, applying traditional physics to the art of animation in a number of different films. In addition to this animation work, he's also a prolific researcher in the field of fluid dynamics. So I guess I'm going to give you the floor, Professor Garcia, and we're going to get started.
Hey, all right. Thank you very much. Thank you for the invitation. I just got out of class, so it was not practical for me to come be there in person. So my apologies for that. So what I will tell you today is a bit of the story about my experience working with the animation industry. The presentation has some audio, so we'll have to make sure that works. So let me just go ahead and start. If I can.
At every twist and turn, there's science involved.
I rehearsed this shot by spinning in my chair.
Can you hear the audio?
Every hop and skip requires an intuitive feel for physics.
It's not natural for a leg to bend this way. Anatomy is a topic that doctors study, but so do artists. Now with animation, physics has become another science which is essential to the craft of these artists.
Physicist Alejandro Garcia is an advisor to animators at DreamWorks, helping them make dragons fly right and explosions look real.
When something doesn't feel like it's physically capable of happening, it pops the audience out of the moment.
So that was just a little clip from a feature that was describing some of the work that I did consulting with DreamWorks. And the one of the films, I worked on a couple of films, and one of my favorites was Trolls. So this is the first Trolls movie. So just out of curiosity, how many of you have seen either this one or the sequels? Any applause or indication? So okay. So when the studio started working on Trolls, one of the challenges was that they wanted to have a world that was magical, but as Cassidy Curtis there, who was by the way, the animator on How to Train Your Dragon for Toothless, as Cassidy was saying, the audience needs to be engaged and feel like they are entering another world, but that they believe that world. They're convinced by it. So so I was approached by first the head of visual effects, Philippe Denis, and also the head of character animation, Dave Burgess. This is us at the wrap party for the film, and you know, they told me it was always a challenge to convey a sense of size and scale in films. So yeah, I did some of the work that I'll describe here, and in fact, I'm if you are patient and look through the credits, you'll find me listed there as the physics consultant for the film Trolls. Now, when the you know, these films take several years of pre-production and such. So what they wanted to do was to have a convincing creature, the trolls, and they are approximately 16 times smaller than humans. So they wanted to, they asked the questions, what are trolls like? What would their world be like? And how can we convince that the troll world actually exists? And I'm going to tell you some of the ideas that I presented to the crew of the film. Not all of them were good ideas. You know, some things they said, no, we're not going to do that, but others kind of inspired them for parts of the film. So now it's always a challenge in films to create a sense of scale. So when a film is successful, when you see something on the screen, it feels monstrously big if it's supposed to be big, or it seems small if the story is such that you want something to feel and small. And it's not as simple as you might think to convey scale. Now, the very simplest way of conveying the size of an object is to put it next to an object of known size. Okay, so like the poster here, one of the early posters for How to Train Your Dragon, it's not a very good poster because it's hard to get a sense of scale for the dragon. The poster on the right is better because it does give you a sense of scale because of the human characters. But there's other visual cues for scale. Things in the distance look smaller, they look different. So, you know, in this poster, Link is in the foreground, missing, you know, is a missing Link, and Insecto is way in the background behind the Golden Gate Bridge. And so Insecto, you get a sense that it's huge. So. And there's a whole bunch of known visual cues for distance, which lets you establish scale. So the simplest is occlusion. Things that are close to you block your view of things that are further away. There's also geometric perspective, which was developed in the Renaissance for paintings. Atmospheric perspective, which was developed first identified by Leonardo da Vinci, and that's that things in the distance, you have an atmosphere that makes them hazier, and so, you know, being close to San Francisco, you're well aware of this fog phenomenon, and so on and so forth. So including stereoscopic 3D. The problem, however, is when you have a fantasy world, like the world of trolls, you don't have a good fixed sense of what size objects are supposed to be, okay? So the trolls are supposed to be just like 4 inches tall, and then the Bergen, who are also in the film, they're supposed to be human size. But there's nothing that tells you that the trolls are tiny. It could be that the trolls are human size and the Bergen are like giants, okay? And it's essential to the story that it's convincing that the trolls are tiny. Okay? So that was the challenge that was posed. And let me tell you some of the answers that physics could help with. The very simplest one is timing. Okay, so the timing of objects gives you a sense of their size. So here's how animators think of it. If you have something the size of a baseball and it falls a distance from a height equal to its diameter, it will take 3 frames to fall that distance. Whereas a bowling ball falling from a height equal to its diameter will take 6 frames. Okay? So the longer it takes something to fall, the slower that it visually travels relative to its size, the larger the object. So one way to think of it is, if you have a troll, if it drops an apple from shoulder height, if it drops an apple from shoulder height, the apple should hit the floor in 3 frames. Whereas for us, when we drop an apple from shoulder height, it takes 12 frames. 12 frames is half a second. Okay? So gravity is the same, but from the troll's small perspective, everything appears to go faster. Now, this is nothing new to filmmakers. Before computer graphics were so prevalent, the way to do big, exciting shots like the tanker truck explosion in Terminator was to do a scale model and then shoot it with high-speed film and then play the film back at regular speed, so basically slowing down the action. And that visually appears as if the objects are larger. So here's from the set of Terminator, which they used this trick. And one of the earlier films that I worked on was Madagascar 3, and in that film, there's a chain of monkeys that is swinging under a plane that's flying through Monaco. And the animators wanted to know what would a 72-foot long chain of animals visually look like. And so we shot this reference and then we played it in slow motion. So by slowing down the timing, it's the equivalent of having something which is much larger. So this 2-foot swinging chain swings with the same timing as a super long 72-foot chain. So that gave guidance to the animators in Madagascar 3 for what it would realistically look like. So here's kind of a nice example from a pretty old film. This is Jason and the Argonauts. So in this case, they do this trick, but they use different timing for Jason and on the boat, as opposed to the Poseidon, who's in the water and next to the cliffs. Okay, so the rocks on the cliff are slowed down. They're filmed separately, slowed down, and then green screen superimposed with Jason. So because the rocks are slow, Poseidon is slow, everything looks like it's gigantic, and then they cut with scenes of Jason at normal speed. Okay. But look, let's watch this scene again, but I'm going to speed it up. In this case, try not to look at Jason and the boat. Just focus on the cliffs and Poseidon. Okay. So here I sped up the playback by a factor of 3. Okay. So now you lose all sense of scale for the cliffs and the rocks and Poseidon. It just looks like somebody dumping gravel into a cheap pool, okay? Which is basically what they did when they filmed that. So this trick of using speed to convey scale, well, you can reverse it by doing fast playback, and then you realize, oh, that's what they did. And it looks kind of fun, kind of silly, but fun to watch it in that form. It's not just things falling with gravity. There's also cadence. So the timing of a swinging pendulum depends on gravity timing, and the swinging of a pendulum is similar to the cadence of walking. And one thing is that even though the walking cadence, how it swings, is slow, the walking speed when something is big is actually large, because when something's big, it has a very large step length. And so even though it is visually moving slowly, in terms of the speed that it's traveling, it's going fast. Okay, yeah, I'll show you an example. So keep your eye on Luke as he's chasing the walker. So the walkers are lumbering to give you a sense of that they're gigantic. So they go slow, and then you see Luke has to run at full speed just to keep up with them. So they did a very nice job of conveying all of that scale. Now watch, he's gonna destroy it, and you'll see how it, when it falls, it he's got to release, and now watch after the walker is destroyed, and all of that is slow, so that, because it's supposed to be huge. All of that was done but with stop motion, by the way. So yeah, if we do the calculations for the trolls, the normal walk cycle, which is a full walk cycle is 2 steps, is 1 second for humans, which is 24 frames. For trolls, it's 4 times faster. So their strides are in 6 frames, and they are not actually very fast. Normal human walking is 2 to 4 miles an hour. Trolls only walk about half to 1 mile an hour. So they walk briskly, but it takes them a long time to cover human distances. And we see this in the film. Okay, the trolls have to run at full speed to try to get away from the Bergen, even though the Bergen are just walking relatively slowly for their, just at a regular walking pace, and they can go faster than even running trolls. But there's more that we can say about what is a troll supposed to be like by combining some principles from biology with principles from physics. Okay? So if we think of trolls as a species, they have some of the visual characteristics of a human, but they have the biological characteristics of a small creature like a mouse or a pygmy marmoset. And this concept of combining an understanding of physics and biology, this is known as allometry. So allometry is basically using physics to predict the characteristics of animals. Okay? Here I'm just going to talk about mammals. It's kind of different if we were doing insects. But for mammals, there's lots of things that you can predict just based on the size of the animal. Here is an example. If you graph sorry?
But we're good, I think.
All right, was there a question?
No, I think there's some people outside. Maybe that's why you're hearing different places.
Oh, that's fine. That's fine. Okay. Yeah. So if we graph the heart rate of an animal versus its size, you see it falls on this nice graph. So you tell me the size of an animal, I can pretty accurately predict its heart rate. And this principle has to do with the fact that as we change the size of an object, the area changes. So area would be like the skin area or cross-sectional areas. It changes at a different rate from the volume of something. So I take this, the little cube is twice the height of the big cube, but the big cube has 4 times the area and 8 times the volume. And that's fundamentally why these things, principles vary with size. So, one example that goes all the way back to Galileo is that bone strength scales with the area, because it goes as the cross-sectional area of a bone, whereas the weight of a bone varies with the volume. So if I have a bone that's 3 times longer, then it's going to have 9 times the cross-section and 27 times the volume or weight. So with this principle, you can pretty accurately predict the skeletal fraction of an animal. Okay, a rabbit that's small, the skeleton is only 9% of the weight of the rabbit. The rabbit has thin bones, whereas an elephant, which has much larger size, the skeleton comprises over a quarter of the body weight of the animal. Okay, so elephants have large, heavy bones. They need to have that, otherwise their bones would crack if they had bones that were similar to a rabbit. And furthermore, the posture of an animal, because of this principle, is a indication of the animal's size. So the larger the animal, the more it has to stand up straight in order to take stress off of its bones. So you can't have an elephant that crouches like a rabbit. It would physically break its bones. So the posture of a creature is indicative of its size. So you see that the Komodo dragon, which is big, it has a more erect posture, whereas the smaller lizards, they have more crouching form. So in those little dragons from How to Train Your Dragon, those are crouched more like iguanas. So they you get a sense that they're the size of iguanas. So. Now, this was one of the principles that the director and the crew did not want to use. They did not want to have the trolls crouched like small animals. They wanted to keep them more erect like humans. But then that further makes the challenge of, okay, so how do we convey that they're small, besides timing that I already talked about? Well, the other thing besides bones that scales this way is muscle strength. Okay, so weight goes up faster with size than muscle strength. So doing the calculations, you can find that trolls are strong for their size. Okay, so if a human can lift 90 pounds, that's only 6 ounces for a troll. But for a human, if 90 pounds is half their body weight, for a troll, 6 ounces is 3 times their body weight. Okay, so the trolls could easily throw each other around or carry, one troll could carry multiple trolls. And in fact, they have that in the film. When King Pepe is trying to save some of his subjects, he's carrying a whole bunch of trolls. It's sort of a principle that small animals are strong for their size. You know, a little ant can carry something that's 10, 20 times its size, its own weight. Another cue is relative stiffness. So something which is small tends to be stiffer for its size. So something which is large will basically be weighed down by its own weight. And you have to do this when you're animating characters with hair. You have to take these principles into account. So the smaller creatures will tend to have frizzier hair. It's more wiry because the weight hardly makes any difference for them. So often in trolls they do this realistically, but because one of the magic powers of the trolls is their hair, they do some wacky stuff and get away with it. Kind of a similar principle is surface forces, like surface tension in a liquid or stiction on solid surfaces. So small creatures can easily stick to surfaces because their stiction force compared to their weight is very high. Okay. There's a nice film that also has tiny creatures called The Secret World of Arrietty. And if you look at the scene where the mother is pouring tea, you'll see that when she pours the tea, it does not look like it would if we were pouring tea. Here it's cycling again. Okay, so watch. Right there, see? So that gives you the sense of, yeah, it's pouring like a droplet, like a small rain droplet would, not like it does at our scale. Okay, so Arietta in this world is supposed to be a tiny little girl. And they use this in trolls as well. There's a scene where Branch easily climbs up a fabric curtain with no problem because small creatures have that strong stiction force on surfaces. Another volume to area effect is burning and dissolving. So things burn and dissolve very quickly at small scales. If you think about it, something with a match for us takes about 30 seconds to burn. And a match, if it was a troll match, tiny troll match would burn in 1 or 2 seconds. Okay, a log in a fireplace for us maybe burns for an hour. For a troll at their scale, it burns in a couple of minutes. And that's one thing that they use in one of the scenes in the film. Branch throws Poppy's guitar into the fire, and it almost instantly burns up. And that's what you expect with a tiny object. You take a tiny scrap of paper and light it, and within a couple of seconds, it's burned completely. One last one is falling speed. So the maximum falling speed for small creatures is relatively slow due to air resistance. Okay, so for small creatures, because their weight is small, the air resistance matches their weight even when they're not going terribly fast. So maximum falling speed for like a squirrel is only 25 miles an hour, and that's not fast enough to actually kill a squirrel. So squirrels can survive falls from any height. Okay. For cats, if they fall from very large heights, about half the time they'll suffer fatal injuries, but half the time not. So of course we don't want to fall from very great heights because we're much bigger than cats and squirrels. So yeah, you calculate the maximum falling speed for a troll. It's only about 7 or 8 miles an hour, and they are completely safe from injury by falls. And they use this in the movie. The trolls have absolutely no fear of heights. At the beginning of the film, we see that they live in trees, human-sized large trees, with no regard for fear of heights. Anyway, those were just a handful of some of the things that I told the animators about what they could think about when they were making the film, and this was to give them ideas and some guidance if they wanted to use it. But sometimes they use them, and if they thought they would be helpful for the film, and sometimes not. So the golden rule really in filmmaking is always do what is best for the story. If it's best for the story, for the action to look physically accurate, then that's what you should do. If it's best for the story, for it to look completely wacko, then that's what you should do. That's the guiding principle. So now, just to finish, I wanted to give you a few bits of advice about breaking into the business. And here, although I've talked about the animation film industry, there's basically the same principles in the game industry, the video game industry. So, in fact, besides consulting for DreamWorks, I also consulted for Electronic Arts on some of their one of their Star Wars games. Unfortunately, it was the one that was at Visceral Studios that was canceled. It was the codename Ragtag. Yeah, a lot of people who work in the animation industry move over to the game industry and back and forth. So a lot of similarities between computer animation and computer video games. So some advice is learn some programming. I mean, that's essential. Try to practice a little bit with animation software like Maya and Houdini, and be conversant with the computer programming languages, especially Python. Take some drawing classes, even if you're a science major, it's very helpful to do drawing classes. This is how I got into animation. I started taking drawing classes, and I got to know people in animation, and eventually was invited to the studio. If you get a bachelor's in some science-related field, consider maybe a master's in animation. I strongly urge you to not go to a for-profit or an online-only school. These are typically quite expensive, and they are not well regarded in the film industry or in the gaming industry. There's exceptions, but very few of them. Some more advice: the best fields to get into are effects animation and character effects. Character effects means doing things like fur and hair for characters, things like that. Effects would be like fire and smoke and clouds. A lot of people tend to gravitate towards character animation, but because they do, then there's way more character animators than there are positions for character animators. So you do much better in some of the other branches in a studio. Start doing work and put together a reel of your work, so that if you want to be hired, you show someone, okay, I know how to do this, I could do this. There's a yearly conference in LA called SIGGRAPH, and it's expensive to attend, but not if you are a student volunteer. And as a student volunteer, you get full access, and all you have to do is just occasionally usher people in and check their tickets as they go in the theaters, and then you can participate in all the events. There's something a little bit similar to that, to Game Designers Workshop, not game, GD, the conference that's in San Francisco, GDC, Game Designers Conference, but SIGGRAPH has even more student opportunities. Think about maybe working abroad, a lot of opportunities there, and it's a tough industry, so prepare to work very hard if that's your passion. So. But if you have great success, you can actually win an Oscar for work that you do as a scientist in the field. They have a special category of Oscars for scientific achievement, and a number of folks that I know from DreamWorks and some of the other studios have won these Oscar awards from the Academy. So. Anyway, that's what I had for you folks today. I hope that was interesting and gave you some idea of what how science overlaps with the entertainment industry. So anyway, I'll leave it at that.
Yeah, thank you, Professor Garcia. I guess we're going to go ahead and proceed to questions.
Sure.
So people can ask questions on the chat for the people on Zoom, or if you have any questions here in the room, you can also ask questions. I guess Professor Garcia, I guess I'll read the questions to you if I see any in the chat.
Okay.
And then I guess we'll have any students that are in the room. If you want to ask questions too, we'll provide that space for you.
Okay. Sounds good.
Let me see. We have, I guess I'm going to start with reading some of the questions on the chat. And if you think of anyone here in the room too, feel free to ask as well. You can raise your hand and I'll call on you. I guess we have first question is from Nicolas Costello. How closely do you work with animators, artists, and software engineers at Pixar?
Oh, Pixar. I did a few presentations at Pixar, and in fact, some of the folks that were at DreamWorks had moved to Pixar, so I knew them there. Pixar was harder to work with. They're more of a, and I think this is the influence from Disney. They're more of a closed studio, so it's very hard for someone from the outside to just come in and do work. It's also from San Jose. It was significantly farther for me to do that. Also, DreamWorks had a dedicated program which worked with universities to do this kind of work, and Pixar didn't. Maybe they have that now because they have that Pixar in a Box collaboration with Khan Academy. So, yeah, it's very similar in the different studios. So.
Thank you, Professor. So we have another question on the chat. This comes from Jack. Jack asks, is the industry moving in any specific directions that you see, as in relying more on fancy VFX than art direction, or vice versa?
Well, of course, the big thing in the industry right now is AI, and how much AI systems will replace work done by artists, and it's already having an impact. right now, it's mostly for pre-production and doing rough work. They still rely heavily on handcrafted work. It just isn't at the same caliber. So, and I'm talking about feature films. If you're doing stuff which is animated YouTube videos for 2-year-olds, yeah, AI is perfectly fine for making those kinds of videos that keep a toddler entertained. But the kind of work that DreamWorks, Pixar, Illumination, that's still very much handcrafted, but and also in the game studios. But yeah, AI is getting so good. It's a huge challenge for the artists working. I don't know how it's going to go.
Thank you for that. I guess, is anyone in the room, before I move on to more questions on the chat, is anyone in the room have any questions? Everyone good for now?
Yeah.
Okay. So I guess another question here that we have in the chat is Alexander Wong, not sure it's Professor Wong, on Zoom. He said that he attended some talks about numerical models for things like clouds or waves in animation, and he said that he was struck by the way they tweaked various, physical parameters, to make like more wispy clouds. He's asking if if this numerical modeling is still popular in animation.
Yes, no, absolutely, and it's gotten very sophisticated. So and in fact, my specialty is in numerical modeling in fluid mechanics. So yeah, I was very much in touch with the folks that developed the numerical simulations used in films. Now, those simulations, although they start out being quite similar to the simulations that we use for scientific research, in films, they have different challenges and different values. So in the film, the simulation of, say, a cloud, it has to look good, but it doesn't have to be physically accurate, okay? If you're designing the cooling system for a nuclear reactor, it better be physically correct. Otherwise, the nuclear reactor will not cool correctly. So that's an example where it's important to get the science right. It doesn't have to look beautiful. For a film, it doesn't have to be right. And often they have to put in different parameters in their simulations so that they can accomplish what the director wants. Okay, so I mean, a friend of mine who does this specifically, story that he tells is that you'll do a simulation of a campfire and the smoke going up from the campfire, and the director will look at it and say, yeah, that's beautiful, that's perfect, but I want the smoke to kind of first start out to the right and then go over to the left. And then also I want the smoke to look friendly. Right now the smoke looks like it's angry. Can you make the smoke look friendly? And you tell this to someone who's a scientist and they say, I can change the viscosity, I can change the buoyancy, I don't know how to make it friendly, but that's the, so they have to have a lot of parameters that they can vary until they get something that matches the vision that the film's director has in mind. So
Thank you for that. Gilberto, the chat asked, and I think you already referred to this, Professor Garcia, about what will be the effect of AI in this industry. I think you might have touched a little bit on that. I also want to do the other question from Julia as well. Can physicists also consult for live action movies?
Oh yeah, absolutely, absolutely. It's very much the same thing, and the consulting that I did was just they had something in a film that had some feature, and they wanted to know ideas and how things were in nature, so that if they wanted to reproduce those. So one film that I also worked on was Home, which was by DreamWorks. It didn't do a lot of box office, but in that film, there's lots of stuff about bubbles. And so I did a lot of research on bubbles, how they move, how the colors look. So yeah, both live action and animation. Yeah, it kind of depends on the film. If you have a film like Interstellar, yeah, they had a couple of physics consultants on that for the black holes and such. So
We also have a question here in person. We're gonna have one of our students here ask that question.
Should I move it here?
I think they can hear you,
Can you
right?
hear me from here?
yes, just fine.
I wanted to go back to the numerical fluid models and like using them in animation.
Mhm.
So do you like as a consultant have a sense of like how to apply those models like artistically, or is that the job of like a specific animator, or is it like a collaboration between you and the director and an animator? Like I'm just kind of interested in like, do you have an intuitive sense of how to make like campfire smoke look friendly or something?
No, because I was just a consultant. They had people full time in their R&D department that would work on that and develop, write these codes and maintain them, and over the years work on that. So I mean, I did talk with those folks, and we discussed various ideas for things. My work was mostly directly with the artists, and it was that the artist had something in mind, or the visual effects supervisors, or like the head of animation. In Madagascar 3, there's lots of circus performance, and so they wanted to have a sense of what realistic trapeze work would look like. We did a calculation for, and actually this is one of the few computer models that I built, was to if you have multiple people on a tightrope, what is the corresponding shape that the tightrope takes, depending on the weight of the characters and the pose of the characters on the tightrope. And if you remember the film, that's Gloria the hippo and Melman the giraffe. They're on the tightrope, and so we wanted to calculate what the tightrope would realistically look like. Because
Right, so you kind of hand them the real model, and then they have people in-house who like take that model and make it into what the director's vision is, kind of.
yeah, well, they didn't need me to create the models. The people in these studios that are in the research department, they have the guy who was the head of it was a PhD from Princeton, and so yeah, he didn't need me. It was good to talk with him and such, but yeah, you shouldn't think that I came in as the physicist. They had
Right.
physicists, but I was the one that was like the jack of all trades. They would ask me one day they would ask me if we had a puppy avalanche, what would it look like? And then the next day, if we have an exploding bubble, what is that going to be? And then the next day, the giraffe and hippopotamus on a tightrope. So I was a consultant in that way. So
It sounds like exciting work.
oh, it was a lot of fun. It was a lot of fun.
Thank
I'm
you.
retiring now, but
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Is there any other questions here in the room? I think I'll proceed to the next one. I think one of our questions posed by Shaila says that what have been some of the trickiest specific effects or things to model with physics? And I think you mentioned that it doesn't have to be perfect in terms of the animation, but in real life that's different, right? So yeah, that's the question that Shaila is posing.
yeah, the tricky part is it has to be believable, and usually the more dramatic the scene, the more realistic and believable you typically want it. The more comedic the scene, then the wackier you want to be. So a scene where and Cassidy Curtis at that little clip at the very beginning, where at the end of How to Train Your Dragon, you see a hiccup falling from the sky. It's a very dramatic scene, and you really want it to feel real because you want to have a real sense of he's very likely to die right there. Okay. If you don't have that, if you just make it like silly or unintentionally pop the audience out and say, oh, it's just a cartoon, you like lose a central key point in that movie, in that story. So, and if you haven't seen that scene, go watch it. It's very, very moving. So I'm getting choked up just thinking about it.
Thank you for that. We also have another question from Key. What software tools are really helpful for this industry?
Yeah, one of the best ones to play around with is for films and animation is Blender. So Blender is a free software for creating computer graphics and computer animation. The other one is Unreal Engine. So I think that's still either free for small projects or so. Unreal is mostly for gaming, but it's also been used for creating animated films or short films. So yeah, either of those. And as I said, I think they're both. I know Blender is free, and I think Unreal is free unless you create a game that makes $10 million, and then you got to pay them.
There's also another question that Julia poses, which actually this is where my what I was thinking about as well.
Mhm.
Julia asks, are there any instances where developments in the film world have gone back and affected the science world?
Kind of indirectly, in that if there's a film about science and that film is successful, then that inspires people and students to consider science. The most recent example, I think, would be Oppenheimer. You know, I mean, it's a very rich film that talks about a rather interesting period in history. Very, very interesting characters. So now, you know, maybe it's not the most inspiring films because it shows some of the ugly parts of science. But it, like they said, no publicity is bad publicity. So if it gets people thinking about science, then that has a contribution. As to something where something in a film actually got people in working on a specific topic, I can't think of anything off the top of my head, but I haven't. It's a really good question. I'll think about it. Now I'm curious to come up with an example. So.
Thank you for that response. I think we're probably going to take the last question here on the chat, which is that what was your favorite scene concept that you were consulted on? And this comes from Cole.
It's tough because I think my favorite film was Trolls because there were so many things that were involved in, but it was for that it's no specific scene. The scene that I really like, which comes to mind, and it was pretty subtle, was there's a scene in Mr. Peabody and Sherman that I worked on, and there's a scene where the characters, Mr. Peabody, Sherman, and Penny, are trying to escape some Egyptian guards that are chasing them, and they go down a ramp, and at the end of the ramp they hit something and they go flying into the air, and they end up landing in a hay basket. And I saw that shot, and I told the head of animation, you know, Mr. Peabody is supposed to be a genius, and Mr. Peabody would not fall like this, because if you look at human cannonball circus acts, they always, as they're traveling through the air, they go into a tuck so that they rotate and they land on their back instead of landing like head first. But Sherman and Penny, because they're just little kids, they would land in a clumsy fashion, whereas Mr. Peabody would land in a professional fashion. And they redid the shot just for something which is, in the blink of an eye, you would miss it. But every time I look at that, I think, yeah, that's nice. So there's probably some other examples, but that's just the one that came to mind.
Yeah, we're reaching towards the end of the workshop, but I also don't want to leave Arman. There's one last question. Everyone in the chat as well. I want to make sure I ask it because the question is, have you ever, and I'm gonna just read the second part of that question. Have you ever encountered creative visions that are either improbable or entirely impossible according to the understanding of physics? If so, how did you navigate it?
Sorry, could you repeat the question? I don't think I quite got it.
Yeah, so is there, have you ever encountered like some sort of vision that are either not possible to do? And if so, how did you navigate that?
When they say vision, do you mean was there something that they wanted to do in a film, but
Yeah,
Just violate physics or something?
Mhm.
So it's like an idea that would
Yeah.
violate.
yeah.
So wrong.
Yeah, so the one that comes to mind, and this is a film that DreamWorks started, and they did most of the film, but then they canceled it. and it was probably a good idea because the film was not turning out very well. So the name of the film was Boo, B-O-O, and it was a Bureau of Otherworldly something. So, and the concept of the film was that you had a ghost investigation. It's like a ghost police. There was a live action film that had kind of the same concept called R.I.P.D. So basically, the ghosts are, sometimes ghosts go bad, and there's a ghost police that goes and catches them. It's kind of like Ghostbusters, but they're ghosts themselves. So they came to me when they were starting to do the film, and they said, you know, we want to make the ghost look realistic. What can you help us with? And I'm like, you know, ghosts aren't real. I don't know what to tell you. How do I make a ghost look realistic? And but then I said, well, what I can tell you, if you want to have the same kind of eerie glow that you have from phosphorescence, I can tell you, explain to you what phosphorescence is all about and why it looks the way it is when you have things that glow in the dark and in the form of phosphorescence. And so I did some research on that and gave them some ideas as to how to make them have the appearance of otherworldly. But yeah, how do you make a ghost look real? I don't know. So anyway.
Well, yeah, thank you so much, Professor Garcia, and thank you for everyone in Zoom as well. We really appreciate all your time. Professor Garcia, once again, thank you so much, and everyone here in the room. So that concludes our speaker series for today, everyone. Thank you so much for coming.